Treaty of Tordesillas maintained the prohibition, which weighed on the Castilians, and neither to push nor phase other things, from the said Cabo Bojador to the Rio de Oro. So they're talking about war between Castile and Portugal, which should fall where Port Limon is. The other part was limited by the Castilian highlands, leaving the isthmus isolated and in a precarious situation. Presuming that the secession war was over, Elizabeth would look to Africa from west. On January 19, 1482, Diego Pierres landed in Duas Partes, a village with an evocative name, to build a fortress. Obtain a local mayor's license. He chose a ravine where there was recovery material. One of the ashlars was dated in an indeterminate year of the 14th century. Since the last two appears on two Muslim maps, which were kept in the Istanbul Museum, called Piri Reis. We'll look at that next. Renamed the province of Castilla de Oro. Felipe forgot it, and he sent Captain Serrano to Rio de Oro. So this is what we see Rio de Oro getting switched to Veraguas by Columbus, and how Rio de Oro and Castillo de Oro get mixed up in history, which is very important because Rio de Oro, the River of Gold, is directly connected to the transatlantic slave trade. To see if they laid down Gilotas or disembarked Moors, which is basically Moors captured in these wars, these mixed wars going on. So without fear or misunderstanding, Raleigh sighted the Rio de Oro on his 1595 voyage. So we continue in this series, The Crowns of Africa, which is us taking a focused look into how the Christian powers operated and the lies and the truth from that. As we know, they tell you the truth. They just leave out a lot of stuff and misinterpret stuff. Okay, that's the Piri Reis map that she's talking about. So you know it's the coast of Brazil. You see the antipodes. Yeah, right here we see the castle or the fort built by Diego. He landed in Duas Partes, which is the two parts, and when I went to look for Veraguas, which Columbus changed to Veraguas, we find one in Panama which has two parts with the Panama Canal. Duas Partes. So you see it on here. You see right there the fortress. As you can also see ships already around the Americas. Okay. A fisherman can be, I know saying the whole thing. Columbus was not the discoverer, but the inventor of the Indies. So basically, he just called it that. Like any tourist promoter, it massified a land frequented by minorities, very possibly elitists. A fisherman can be elite if he knows the meaning of the term ethics and applies it to his behavior. And a king, the opposite, to have a rough and rapacious spirit. The Genoese managed that even the tailors wanted to discover. And he put gold species and arms at the disposal of the Catholics. Juan II of Portugal did not grasp the scope of the operation in its beginnings, assuming the discoverer aspiring to a routine concession in the vicinity of his demarcation to avoid confusion, a consequence of the change and instability of place names. The monarch refrained from naming the islands rediscovered, and the rediscoverer. So Juan II took that approach. So we already know that Portugal only started to take that approach after Castile in the 1492 fiasco with Columbus. That each possessor altered the denomination of the same parcel did not affect the informed. So just the fact that people were creating different maps with different place names in the same places didn't affect the nobles and the people who were actually frequenting different places around the world. They still knew where they've been going at that time. Nowadays they working nowadays with those confusions. So the monarch refrained from naming the islands rediscovered and the rediscovered. Read that. They knew what they were referring to and at what point they were playing, speaking interchangeably of Africa, Guinea, or Barbary, the favorite name of Canaries and Andalusians. So most of the people on that side of the world at this time knew this place as Africa, Guinea, or Barbary. To indicate that they practice horseback riding and pillaging in the land of Moors, enemies of the faith. So a lot of, again, like you always saying, a lot of the wars between Moors and Christians happened on these lands in those times. They just changed them to Indian stories, Indian genocide by Spanish, Spanish, Portuguese. And after that, they bring Africans. But what we're trying to show. But right now, as you can see, how they sneak in. Which when we been younger in school, they ain't never bring up Ghana in the Columbus story. But now Ghana exists in the Columbus story when you look for it. When you look in the Columbus story now, they mention in Ghana. He always did exist there if you really looked into the Columbus story. But now they mention it because people looking into the shit. So when you see Ghana, they already gonna explain to you what they talking about. the way they're gonna frame it is they talking about a modern map Ghana that he allegedly got information from about the Indies. So they bringing Ghana into the American discovery story slowly but surely to try to keep the narrative the way they need them to be, instead of just the truth for the matter, right? Idiomatic corruption, easily understandable, turned Guinea into Guyana. So we see that today on the maps, where in Brazil we have a Guyana. Excuse me. And the logic in East Africa that we know today as such, also called Ethiopia, or more commonly Congo and Angola. Easily understandable. It turned, we already read that. So basically it's saying it easily misconstrued based off the fact that it always been two Ethiopias, one on both sides. Names as such because of the dark skinned people they found on both sides. Going back to the early days, it been dubbed the two Africas or the two Ethiopians by Christians. So the confusion easily created. So we got a few more. It is not possible to deny the relations of Grenada with Westeros, which is one of the names I believe used by Templars for this continent. Probably because that the Moorish gold that was a currency standard among Christians until the second quarter of the 15th century. So the Moorish gold been the currency at that time. It fell somewhat abruptly. Its devaluation coinciding with the advance of the Knights of Christ in the direction of Amazon and Bojador. In the late 14th century, the Portuguese coin was made of copper under the D. Duarte silver appeared, following gold. So now we starting to see them taking over this Moorish gold. These Knights of Christ. And this in 1438 we leading up to the 1492. Because the Castilians and the Catalans also crossed the sea. In addition to Genoese, the four of the land, the Florin of Aragon, and the Portuguese Crusader was appreciated. So, as we can see, way before 1492, we already got a lot of traffic back and forth with a bunch of European powers, African powers on both sides. And we know this to be true because we see these maps. We're going to look at it in a little second. They ain't hide these maps from you. Because the Castilians and the Catalan also crossed the sea, in addition to Genoese, the four of the land of Florin of Aragon. They said the Portuguese Crusader was appreciated. Alfonso V was added to his titles, the De Quem y de la Mar. So he started to add titles based off his so-called conquering or conquests over here, through 24 coins and 154 issues throughout his reign in gold. So she connecting that to overhead conquest, basically your goal, my goal. And the reason why a lot of these stories and stuff being hidden, because a lot at stake. Decadent the Marinids, The campaign of Alonso V was scandalously profitable without being able to stop him. The Sharif Abdallah, who made war in Ifriqiya to the squares of Alcazar, Kegwer, and Ceuta. He added Tangier and Assyria. Wikipedia got a page on the conquest of Assyria by the Portuguese, taken from the Moors of Allende, according to Pulgar. So you got wars between Moors going on at the same time during this conquest of this crowns of Africa by the Christian, which those records much harder to get to because of my lack of the Arabic documents. But I got the Spanish ones for your ass. But we're gonna see a lot of that mixed in these records. Even being on the coast of Aquende, as a result of the Portuguese tour on the west side, there was a short-lived Café de los Cristianos. So, we see setups of different kingdoms over here, which was frequented by the Jews of Lisbon. Duly authorized, they traded with Anafi and Saleh, developer of contacts with Allende. The goal, his possession denounced societies of navigators. The French boom of the 13th century could have its origin in those Normans who visited the goal of Guinea. So like I was saying, these Moors of Normandy, they've been coming back and forth, and a lot of those secrets leak out in Europe based off that connection. If you look at the old uniforms and stuff, that go everywhere. And their horse go all over. And they've been getting from somewhere. And it was said to be Senegal and Africa. So now we're getting into where it really came from. So obvious that as the man grows and diversifies, people starting to want to know what's going on. The same happened with supply, inciting the desire to acquire. Even in the production of surpluses grew at infinitum. The grain or iron could not be converted into gold if it was left over in France. It was because it was brought from somewhere. So they've been trading grain and iron. We've been giving them gold. And our lack of iron and stuff like that, we'll get into later, but it's been harder for us to create certain kind of weapons without those. We can do with gold. We had gold, like they had iron and steel and shit. So official history unifies the two mines in Senegal, and it consents to a single royal Rio de Oro under the Saharan Cape of Bordador without river or gold. Transferred the west to Levante to east. Transferred the west to east. Cabo de Aguirre, Sierra Leone, Cabo Tres Puntas, and even the Little Sea, or Mar Pequena. They appear in what was the Algarve of the Barbary, which we call Morocco today, and Fez. But the story of navigation through the Africa of the Levant of the East, the Africa of the East, which was so called in the 18th century, differed diametrically from those we have been collecting. In August 1487, Bartolome Diaz set sail from Lisbon with the intention of discovering the eastern Atlantic without seeing the island. It recorded headlands, river slopes, and other geographic features in a difficult 16-month journey to the Cape of Storms, which is called Good Hope, or what we call South Africa. With the exhausted crew attacked by scurvy, they crossed the sea, returning through the Mina and Principe to search for the Azores like everyone else. Going back to South America, to hop back to the Azores, to hop back to Portugal or Lisbon. could still be able to go through the Canaries to get here. So quick link, I think we got a little bit more to go. Time set, all right. Conquest of the Canary Islands, which we talking about again, um, the Americas. But they calling it this. That's how you can find it. If you go look these up, you can find these stories. 1393. We got Lanzarote and Fuerteventura and so-called slingshot and so-called iron. These are the names of the place. Palma, San Miguel de la Palma, and that's by Alfonso de Lugo. Alfonso de Lugo, that's who Columbus steal all his conquest. His conquest gets stolen from Columbus, see, 1492. And we got Gran Canaria, which is Colombia. Hell, which is lower, a little bit lower under Colombia when you start to get harder, like hell, right? So they call it hell, and that's the conqueror. Juan de Litancourt in 1422. I think he even had one of the first ones. Yeah, Ronaldes in the Spanish. Yeah, you see. And then going back to the Templars that she been talking about earlier, when they had to go, he had to come from somewhere. So Tenerife, still Venezuela, and parts of South America. The Spanish called it Tierra de Negros. At one point. Take another look at it. Gentlemen owners of the Canary Islands. Alfonso the Ninth. He the first one. He the one who called for the Crusades in Mar. So he called a crusade against us as Moors, because you only got crusades against Saracens and Moors. When it comes to using terms like crusades, basically, even called the crusade, they against Mar de Africa. So the overseas, beyond the seas in Africa, he wanted to call it a crusade. That's what they've been calling it at that time, Alfonso. Excuse me. And the conquest and from the Catholic Church been called conquest of Fez. So that's what it is. Henry III, he jumped in. There's always been a crusade. It started from Alfonso in 1344. Juan II, he the one who took this to another level. He he one who started to inspire this thing called the conquest of America. He didn't call it America at his time, neither. He called it Barbary and Mar. But you see, as you can see, he going hard. Juan II. And then you got Henry IV. He jumped in later. And then good old Isabel la Católica, 1492. Slowly seeing places are still America, but we now starting to see it as the New World in the Indies, with Isabella and her grandsons Carlos and Segunda. You see Segunda, he started to get lord of both islands because they started to deal with the East Indies too. He been one of his titles been kings of the East and West Indies. But what history do they start with Isabella la Católica and act like it ain't not happened before? One of the Wikipedia pages got they add a little paragraph in there recently. I can't much find the page no more, but they talk about Juan II and them probably may have knew. Some scholars now believe Juan II may have knew of the Americas before the 1490 Isabella and all that shit. Like, I've been making these videos for the last few months saying that. But so, conquest of Westeros, the same thing. But what's interesting, we got a native crown, and what I mean is the lords, most of the lords, been already from here. They've been already going back and forth from here to Europe, and they already been into the world empire, and they've been native lords. They've been from here, and like you already had wars between different tribes here, so those wars actually been international wars also. Like one tribe would have fight another tribe, you might have been fighting the tribe of who under the Sharif and one under the Pope. And that's what it's talking about. We got private natives. We got Corona Herrera, the crown of Herrera. And you see they started to call it Guinea in Africa and Barbary and Mina and Corona and the Herrera records. And that's why they don't want to talk about Herrera records. They don't want to talk about nothing before Columbus because of this right here called Canaria and La Palma. All these islands in the middle of the sea right now, and all these on the west coast of Africa. So they skipped that, and they skipped the Lugo Walls because that's who Columbus make change all his conquests from Lugo. And we going all the way to 1492 when he just registered and everything. See, he registered in Guinea, Amazons, Barbary, Agadir, Mecca, Mesa. You see, he had one of Veragua, which is Rio de Oro on this side. Changing all these conquests up here to what we know today as a new Spain based off the Columbus story. We're going to see that. The Lugo campaign, the Columbus scores talk about this. These are all the same things. Everything that Lugo had as conquering ship, Columbus came and registered. And I already explained all this. You see, change from conquest to discovery in 1492. Change back to conquest afterwards. So as we see on Wikipedia, they talk about it in their own way. Talk about John Cabot again. They try to say John Cabot was the real Columbus, or he should have been, or whatever, but they're absolutely right, because the Portuguese and those Moors of Andalusia before it was a Portugal, or Port de Gale. They've been Moors who already been frequenting the codfish of the northeastern of the North Americas. From the Azores, they've been hopping over back and forth. And then they jump straight to 1506 when the evidence pop up in their world but they're gonna tell you that evidence show that they've been always frequented from the two coasts. It's easy travel. So as they say, you see how they jump with 1 second. Like I said, he the one who like look at it as discovering shit. So 1 second family restored the policies of the Atlantic exploration, reviving the work of his great uncle Henry the Navigator. The Portuguese exploration were his main priority in government. Portuguese explorers pushed south along the known coast of Africa with the proposed, you see how they say known coast. See, they put stuff right there in your face, you just gotta know what you're looking at. They say known coast because they look at these records too, and they know that they mention more than one Africa in these records. So they put known coast in there. That already give that away to me that they know it's must be another one with the purpose of discovering the maritime route to India and breaking into the spice trade. So 1482, foundation of the coastal fortress and trade post of San George de Mina. So they're taking a lot of these stories that we've been reading and they putting them in Africa as we know it today. The true extent of Portuguese explorer have been the subject of academic debate. And look how they get into the Ethiopian search for the kingdom of Prester John, which is again what we've been talking about earlier with these Templars who already been here for the longest since we've been dealing with Ophir. And we get to that at the end. According to one theory, some navigators were kept secret of fear of competition by neighboring Castile. That's one theory, huh? The archives of this period were mainly destroyed in the fire after the 1755 Lisbon earthquake. And what was not destroyed during the earthquake was either stolen or destroyed during the Peninsular War, or either lost. Excuses. I mean, I got a lot of information. How's that? So, like I've been saying, empire. So you got New Spain with their claims. This means Castile and Aragonese when they join. And you see the new kingdom of New Granada, the kingdom of New Granada. We see this. And you know these maps ain't hidden. And they expect you to believe that in 1492, in 3 boats that kick off all this empire. Instead of just telling the truth, go back to when they start for real, and which will take you back to the BC. And you can deal with Moors and Christians. You still gonna be dealing with Moors and Jews. And they're gonna later deal with Moors versus Christian stories and all that. Gonna keep showing that this is the old world, not the new. You see France and Britain. All these stories exist in the records of these companies. Great Britain, France. Boy, I take France. They get rid of France up here through treaty. But New France supposed to be up there. That's kind of 1794, yeah, that's kind of late. But we still see Spain and Portugal. And when I used to look at these maps back when I've been younger, I used to always ask like how it didn't make no sense to me. Like how we got a New Spain already over here. From like, you know, make them look like they've been the best army in history to come wipe out a whole continent like that. And take that thing over in that small amount of time. Because New Spain showing up on maps in 1500s. At like 1508 and stuff like that. Huge territories. Which would be 8 years. Not enough time from 1492 to make that type of claim, in my opinion. So you see the different Guyanas, Afghanas, different conquerors came in later, 1794. Yeah, that's much later. In the age of discovery, you see they talking about creator omnium, which they put you at 1402, which we put you at 13, whatever, 13 something, when the Betancourt, the French, they talking about it in the expeditions. But what they telling you we happen at is on those little Canary Islands in the middle of the ocean. They strip all this away from America and start at Columbus. But they talk about it. But just put all this in South America and now you got the truth. Now you see they get into West Africa, they get into Brazil and the what you call American Levant, the eastern parts of South America, or any parts where Moors still rule Lord Nova. That's what these stories has been going on before. And you see how Portugal get their mark in Brazil, the first mark. The thing that threw everybody off was the ivory in the Madeira Islands, which still don't make sense because the ivory put everything in Africa because we see elephants in Africa, not America. But that's ivory. We've been when we look at investigating other animals that has smaller horns and stuff like that too, and elephants that show up in records over here. It says the ivory was so much in stock that they say you might have wiped it out on the side. All these stories showing that, but you know they need you to believe in the modern day aspect of this. So we'll continue on the next one. Peace.